Welcome back to another episode of Transformation Talks. I am your host, Sam Forget, and today we'll be joined by Sarah Nolan, a former litigation lawyer of 22 years, turned fitness, fat loss, and nutrition coach, and host of the Wellness Brief podcast. Sarah helps professional women and business owners feel fit, healthy, happy, and strong. Sarah, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I think a great place for us to start would be with your 22-year career in law. And I would imagine throughout that career, you faced a ton of the challenges that you are now helping your clients with. So I would love to hear some of what those challenges were, what you found challenging with your own health and fitness, and then how you eventually overcame them and started to manage things yourself.
Yeah, well, as you said, I was in law for 22 years, which seems a very long time.
No.
I don't feel old enough to have a 22-year career behind me. But yeah, I was in law, so I was a litigation lawyer, and it was a challenging role. So to put it mildly, it was very challenging, both on my physical, like how I felt day to day, but also feeling just constantly exhausted and not like there's enough time in the day. And when I transitioned into coaching, which was when I turned 40, I just had up that moment where I reassessed where I was. I'd achieved everything I really wanted to achieve in the legal career. And I did love my legal career as well. This wasn't a thing of me hating it and wanting to get out, but I did feel like I wasn't quite aligned anymore. So when I was thinking about things I was passionate about, it was that ability to still take care of yourself while being ambitious and being successful. And it can be really, really hard to do. So I ended up transitioning into coaching, but the niche of professional women sort of found me. So that's the women that I've always been surrounded by. And I had a really, really good network from my legal career and had so many chats over the years with women who were saying, oh, I just can't find time to do this, or I don't feel like I'm ever anywhere near the top of the priority list. And I knew that it was somewhere I could add value. And I'd struggled as well to take care of myself at times, but realised there was a marked difference in even performance at work when I was looking after myself and when I'd let that go. So, yeah, I'm just really, really passionate about it. So it was a natural next step. It didn't seem very natural to some people around me who thought I'd gone mad by
Sure.
leaving law, but it felt natural to me.
You mentioned feeling exhausted all the time throughout much of that career. Was it just, super long hours? I saw a post you put up recently where you said you were constantly available and responsive, adding to that to-do list. So, how is that something that you personally started to manage a bit better? And actually, I'm curious, like when you got the reins on it for yourself, was it toward the end of your career? Was it something that you figured out early on? Like, what was that progression like just for you?
I would say for me, it was going into my sort of mid 30s. Because
Okay.
if I'm completely honest, when I started out in law, I was 20, like just before I was 21. I didn't really have I didn't give any thought to taking care of myself. It was all about just career progression. And I think your ability to withstand certain things is greater at that age. You get away with a lot more, don't you? Time is
Sure.
on your side. um, but I did. With me, it wasn't that I just completely neglected myself. I went through phases of doing that, and it was usually when the pressure was on with work, I would notice that I was slipping, and there were just no boundaries. It's really hard when you're starting out in a career like that, where you are expected to impress and it is a very highly competitive industry. So you are wanting to stand out, and having boundaries. I mean, it wasn't something that even existed. We're talking 20 odd years ago now. And I think now the new generation are probably a bit better with that than we were. But that was what I sort of worked on, started putting boundaries in place, even just small things like trying not to check emails in the evenings. Once I'd logged off the computer, that was me done. It didn't always work, but I tried to put boundaries in place, just more to protect energy as well as physical time. Because like when you were saying about the exhaustion, there's a really common misconception that you can look at your diary and think, oh, there's an hour there, after work for me to go to the gym. And yeah, you might have a physical hour free, but if you're mentally absolutely exhausted, you would rather go and use that to scroll on your phone or to lie in a dark room and not speak to anyone. Like the fact that someone would suggest that it's as easy as you just go into the gym in that hour when you are depleted, it's not the best advice, is it? So that's sort of the angle that I come from, is like more through the lens of having lived it.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this calendar example of like you can look down on paper and see that technically you have an hour available, but it kind of lacks context. And to me,
Yeah.
that's very similar to looking at a client food log. Let's say that we see two pieces of pizza and a glass of wine. Of course, maybe there are some coaches that would look at that and say pizza's not healthy, wine isn't healthy. But with context, we know this person went to a get together with no clue in advance what would be served. The only options available were alcohol and pizza. There was an enormous amount of peer pressure. So, given the context, giving all of those factors, like, okay, we have a bit more information, and this person actually did reasonably well. So, I like that you
Mhm.
said with this calendar example, like, and I think it's pretty typical, say for the business owners and professional women that I work with as well, to want to put something in every single block of the
Yeah.
calendar without factoring in context, like we're talking about those other elements. I mean, there's a client I'm working with right now. She owns a travel agency, exceptionally busy. Stress creeps up at times, and one of the things we did recently talk about was purposefully leaving gaps in her calendar to be able to recharge a little bit because nothing actually ever takes as long as we expect it to. It's always a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So you constantly feel behind or like off track in some
Yeah.
way. But it's definitely, I think, a very uncomfortable thing to not plug something into every available hour. It almost feels like you have to, or you feel
Yeah.
guilty,
Or
you
it's a
know?
dead hour. It's wasted.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
always say as well, like even to my clients when they're planning out the week, I'll always say, beginning of the week, look, when are you going to do these workouts? If it's not on the calendar, you're going to put something else is going to go there. So you have to, it's like you were saying then, if you've got a free hour, you're going to shove something in there. And if you're not, so if your sort of workout time or your time that you're going to go out and get some movement in isn't plugged in, something else is going to go there, isn't it? But I always say it's not a case of just looking for the gaps. It's how what you know yourself well. Like, what is your energy going to be like at that time of day? Like, are you going to have other demands on your time? Have you got the kids with you at that time of day, or are you putting it in for after work when you know full well that you're going to be way too tired? So it's not just about like looking at your calendar, is it, and thinking, oh, we can slot it in there. It's like, is that realistic? Are you gonna have like are you gonna do a workout at that time? Probably not. So it's like factoring in like energy levels and everything, isn't it? That fluctuate throughout the day and often diminish throughout the day.
definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this will seem like a random example, but I think with myself and studying Spanish, it is still a very cognitively demanding thing for me. It's not something I'm particularly good at. And I can't even tell you how many times I've said, okay, when I'm done working from 6 to 8 every night, I'm just going to put my head down and study. And okay, I may have that gap on my calendar, but it's not factoring in by the time I'm done with, say, client check ins that day and content creation and filming, and then a hard leg day at the gym. I'm not saying it's impossible for me to study in the evenings.
No.
Obviously, tons of people do it, but not necessarily the overly ambitious, super aggressive plans that I think we are likely to do when, to your point, we just look at the calendar gap and not necessarily everything surrounding it, how we might feel just energetically.
Yeah. Yeah. And also rest is productive. I think
True.
this is something definitely with high achieving men and women, but a lot of the women I work with, rest is actually something that they're not really familiar with. And it's like it's an uncomfortable thing. It's that comes back to that feeling like you should be doing something with your time, and that if you're not, it's in some way lazy. Because I think as kids we're sometimes learned that sitting around is lazy, and it's rest is productive, especially like the more pressurized your job is, the busier your family life is, and whatever ever else you're juggling, the more rest is important. And it's the first thing that goes out the window. Like the sleep, I will say, protect your sleep with everything. Like sleep is so important. But again, it's like those habits of working into the night and checking your phone even in the middle of the night and things like that you're really, really not helping the situation at all.
Or so how did you start to protect your sleep more throughout your career? I know you said one of the things you did was unplugging a little bit sooner, or at least trying to, whenever you could, shut down the laptop. Were there other changes you made that made a big difference from like a sleep quality restorative perspective?
The main thing that I started to do was actually I used to have my emails on my phone as well as my laptop, and this is just a standard thing that people have now, isn't it? But I would notice myself going onto my emails even at like 9, 10 o'clock at night. And if you are a lawyer, there is a good chance that there will be a new email there because everybody works stupid hours. So I would then see the email, go to bed just thinking about the email. I couldn't speak to anyone at that time because everyone, well, I wouldn't have emailed someone else or a client or like a colleague or something. So you're then just left sort of thinking about it, probably spiraling a bit, worrying about it. So I started going into the settings on my phone and actually turning them off. So I would shut the laptop, I would turn the emails off. And it was hot because every now and then I would put them back on and have a quick look. But I got better at sort of doing that. And it was more just so that if it wasn't something I was going to deal with there and then, I didn't need to see it until I was going to deal with it, i.e., the next day. And the sleep was more important than me spiraling for the night. So that was something, and it is something that I do say to my clients, like if you allow work to be the last thing you see before you go to bed, especially if your job's stressful, you're really setting yourself up to fail when it comes to having a restorative sleep. And even things like I'm not the best with not having my phone in the bedroom and stuff like that. People say that, don't they? But for me, I did find as well, like sleep meditations and things like that. If I was particularly stressed, there's like free apps you can get, where you can just sort of, it just helps you to relax. It's doing something that winds you down, isn't it? And some people, it's reading a few pages of a book or whatever it might be. But for me, it was just having a clear cut off between checking work and going to bed. And it needed to be a couple of hours at least for me to be not thinking about it still. So it's a bit of a vicious, and I would try and keep them off at weekends, all weekend. Again, sometimes I was okay, sometimes I wasn't. But yeah, if you're not going to deal with it there and then, you don't need to see it. So that was sort of how I started to. But I'm talking now, this was in my last few years. So, I'd probably done 18, 19 years by that point of having it disrupt sleep. So, but I actually, even in complete honesty, I did that because I had to, because my sleep was so bad. I'd let it get to that point before I did anything. Whereas I think usually that's what people do, isn't it? They wait until they hit a point, and this comes down to the same things with like fat loss and taking care of yourself generally. You get to a point where you're so unhappy, or you are the choice is taken away from you. You have to sort of do something, rather than us like nipping it in the bud quicker. So
Yes. No, definitely. I think it does get to that point, like the expression that the pain of saying the same versus the pain of change, and that we
ah,
generally don't make a change until the pain of saying the same exceeds the perceived pain of making whatever that change is. I do think that's the case for a lot of people. But I like that distinction you made about, or kind of that audit of, okay, the thing that I am about to check. Is there an action step for me to take right now? Is this something I'm actually going to manage? Am I really going to communicate with a client at 10 o'clock at night? And if the answer is no, there's quite literally only downside to you seeing whatever that email is, because then even if you're not actively problem solving by staying up on your laptop, subconsciously, the wheels are turning.
and
It's
then you
there
and
and
well, then the next day you're not like in the best position to deal with it as well, especially if it is something really stressful. You want to be well rested and on top of your game, don't you? You don't want to be absolutely shattered, like living on caffeine, trying to deal with this thing that if you'd just gone to bed, you would
yeah,
have been in a better position to deal with. So, but it has
definitely.
took a very long time for me to realise that.
It takes some practice
It
for
takes a
sure.
while.
Yes. One thing that I do really like, even when I am following this advice that we're giving, and I find that my wheels are still turning, is just literally a written brain dump. I have a little 4-inch
Yeah.
notepad next to it's like on my nightstand. And And if I do find that there's anything specific I keep going back to mentally, specific client work I want to get done, or even just content ideas, it's not always necessarily stressful. Sometimes it's a pretty
Busy.
neutral, yeah, it's just, yeah, like, oh, tomorrow I got to make sure that I order groceries in between this and this and whatever it is. But your brain, I don't think necessarily distinguishes. It's just, okay, there are five different tasks, a variety of stressful and non-stressful that are all floating around there. And again, our brains will subconsciously repeat those thoughts, try to problem solve. And I find that the simple act of just getting them out of my head, it's not like this pretty journal session. I'm writing
No.
groceries tomorrow, banana, email, Sarah, like just very simple things. And I find that even that just like again getting it out of my head and feeling like okay, now I have this cue tomorrow that is ready to go, but that's not a right now thing. Right now my job is to rest, and like you mentioned, Sarah, that's actually really productive to feel recharged and ready to go, energetically, cognitively speaking. And I think that's a good reframe for people who struggle with guilt about taking their foot off the gas at all. You're actually more effective when you do periodically take your foot off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, it's the same with even taking time off work, isn't it? The same people who desperately need time off work are the ones who aren't taking it. And it is meant for recuperation and it's meant to be restorative. Or one of the really common things you get in professional services, like I would get this in law as well, is you go on holiday and you're basically just working from a different location. Because nothing stops. It's not like where I would go on holiday and I wouldn't, it would be a constant, firefighting, trying to hold off what I could till I got back and dealing with what I could in the most efficient way so as I could get back to trying to restore myself. So it's,
Yes.
it's just, yeah.
No, no. And a buddy of mine, Brian Cron, so you're mentioning how the people that tend to need this rest the most are often the most resistant to it. A buddy of
Yeah.
mine, Brian, he'll tweet out periodically that the type of person who feels like they don't have time for a 15-minute walk before work are the exact kind of people who need to get in a 15-minute walk before work. And I have found
Exactly.
that to be true over and over. The people who feel like they can't possibly, and again, of course, you had mentioned just the nature of like being a business owner, being a professional woman, being somebody who's ambitious. Yeah, there will be times you have to negotiate some of these
Yeah.
things we're talking about. It's just the nature of the work. But I think doing it gradually less often and recognizing that the more adverse you feel to something, the more resistant, the more uncomfortable, there's a good chance that it's probably the very thing that you are due for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really, really true. Yeah. It's really, really common.
And actually, on the topic of non-negotiables, I know I just mentioned negotiating a little bit here and there,
Yeah.
but non-negotiables in general, throughout your career or with the women that you're working with now, is that a typical thing where you'll say, kind of, here are some minimum standards that I want you to have in place? And if so, what do those typically look like?
Yeah, so and yeah, I will always set non-negotiables with my clients, and they'll so for some people they'll be pretty consistently the same, but it depends on what their week looks like. So when we do check-ins, like if they say to me, I've got a big deadline this week, I've got a 4 p.m. deadline on Friday. It's not a case of it's unrealistic to expect that they are going to go for a walk before they do the work to meet that deadline. Like that deadline is going to be the focus for the week. So in that instance, we would look at what we could do around it, and we might just have more stripped back, like rather than there being like a step target, it might just be you're going to get out for 15 minutes, or something like that. Um, if their week, just depend on what their week looks like, but it will always center around movement, nutrition. It'll be things that can help them to feel good day to day as well. So it might well be that it's like drinking a couple of liters of water, which is something that a lot of people don't do, but it really helps with cognitive performance and it helps with energy and all of that, doesn't it, as well? It might be that we're going to get them eating 3 meals a day, because again, a really common thing that you see is the more busy someone is, the more likely they are to skip meals. And then they see a drop off in energy. So I have clients who come to work with me. I've got one client who's working with me purely to improve her performance at work. And so the byproduct of it is that she is improving her overall health, but her actual driver is that she wants to be on top of her game, and she's recognized, she's a former lawyer as well, but she's recognized that that really plays into performance at work. So we're working on energy and making sure that she is resting, but that she's moving. So it depends what the goal is. If it's fat loss, then it's going to be nutrition and it's going to be movement each day. And it's just setting it at a point where it's manageable so that you don't feel like you're failing. It does have to push you. Like, this is the thing as well, isn't it? There's no point just telling people what they want to hear. And you said when you touched on, like, you got to choose the pain of staying the same or the pain of change, and it doesn't have to be painful as such, but it's going to be uncomfortable at times, isn't it? So, but I suppose that's where having me or you to help with those moments that's the value of it, isn't it? So
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, yeah. That's the other thing I'll tell clients too is okay, yeah, there is that analogy of the pain of staying the same versus the pain of change. But ideally, as experienced coaches, we can make that side of the scale a little less painful. We can make
Yeah.
it a little bit more tolerable for you. But I really like the idea of having the non-negotiables be somewhat fluid based on what you have each week, because
Mhm.
certainly we could set up some universal non-negotiables that you're able to nail every single week, no matter what. But those would likely be based off of your busiest, most demanding weeks, where perhaps
Yeah.
during at least somewhat more flexible weeks, we can raise the bar a little bit. So I
Yeah.
do like the idea of ebbing and flowing. And of course, going back to the value of coaching, that's where you can collaborate at the beginning of every week and say, all right, what do you got? What's non-negotiable from a
Yeah.
work and family perspective? What has to get done? What do you have left for time, for energy and bandwidth? We again, we want to be factoring that in as well. Okay, based on this week's demands, let's make this the floor, and anything you do over that, wonderful. But
Yeah.
this is where the standard that we're going to hold you to. And I also like how you mentioned making sure that floor is still reasonably high. I do think our industry for a very long time now has always just operated with extremes of either, we all have the same 24 hours in a day discipline, or yeah, definitely not. Or on the other side, it's, give yourself grace, which I like the general sentiment, but sometimes I think
Yeah.
we can do that to excess and almost let ourselves off
Yes.
the hook a little bit. So I
Yeah.
like to try to find that spot in the middle of those two things. We're not being unreasonable, but we're not being overly soft.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Otherwise, you don't see results. And then the person gives up anyway. So, it's our job, isn't it, to make sure that what we're doing is steering them in the right direction. And if we know that they're not doing enough to make real change, it is also our job to sort of highlight that. That's what they're coming to us for, isn't it? But recognizing that, like, there'll be some days that the your health and whatever goals you're working towards our job is to keep them on the list of priorities, but it's not going to be number one. And I think if it's in the list of priorities, if we can get it into the top 5 for some people, that's amazing. Like, but to expect that getting your steps in or going and doing a workout is going to be the top priority in our client's life it's just not realistic, is it, at all? But it's just sort of every time it starts to slip, just keep pushing it back up so it's at least up there.
Definitely. A
Um,
visual analogy I saw for this from Brad Jensen, who's also a coach. He had a plate on an Instagram video, and I forget the exact food he had, but he had a few different types of food on the plate, and he said, okay, each one of these represents career, family, personal obligations and admin, the health and fitness side of things, and he had all these categories.
yeah.
And he showed that sometimes the portions of each of these foods might be a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller, but all we're ever trying to do is exactly what you said, Sarah. We just don't want to take whatever that health and fitness portion is and slide it off the plate altogether and make the
Yeah.
mistake of, I know we've both heard this from clients a million times. Well, once things settle down a little
Oh,
bit, once things are a little less crazy, then like I'll reintroduce it. But it doesn't ever really happen, and if it does, it's
no.
not for long. And actually, I think this would be a great next question for you. How do you respond to those clients who say some version of, and I think it's good intentions, but some version of, once things settle down, then I'm going to fully commit to this. Once things die down a little bit, how would you help a client with that?
Do you know, the first thing I usually will say is, well, have a think then, when was the last time that that happened? And if you, when you actually just ask them the question and put it back on them, they often, the answer is, I can't remember. Or, you know, and they answer their own question, then, you know, it's not really realistic, especially if you've no intention of changing your job, your kids are not miraculously going to start looking after themselves. You know, it's like that's what you're working with. So unless something is going to actively change, then no, that's what you're dealing with. And unless you make it work within the life that you have, it's not going to happen at all. So it's almost better as well when I get clients start with me and they'll be saying, I want to start with you on a Wednesday when I'm at my busiest. And I'm like, that's the client who really wants this, you know, rather than pushing it, kicking it down the road and kicking the can down the road and waiting for, oh, I do want to start with you, but I'll wait a couple of months because I'm really busy with work. I'm like, that's the most valuable time to do it because you need to be able to manage your busiest days. So that's how I sort of do it, but in an empathetic way as well, because I do know how it feels. You know, it's often it's overwhelm, and that's what I see as opposed to it being a physical time issue. Sometimes it's the perception of time and the energy thing that we were talking about before. It's like just because you've got a free hour, you know what I mean? You need to fill that hour, or you're realistically going to go to the gym. Like it's, you know, you could be absolutely fried by that point, couldn't you? So
Yes,
so
big
yeah,
time.
so it's more just working with them to find out what their challenges are because everyone struggles with different things, don't they? And you do get some common denominators, but certain clients will struggle with different things. So I'll always go for like the low hanging fruit first, find out what are the things we can sort of, you know, improve quickly so that they feel like there's some real momentum. And then you start slowly chopping at the things that are the bigger problems. And it could be like I've got one client it came really apparent in the first week that evenings, getting the kids ready, getting the kids to bed, then logging back onto the laptop to work. And her evenings were where we needed to concentrate. Everything else was okay, but the evenings it just, so it's like just working out for that person where the attention needs to go, really, isn't it?
I like that 1-2 punch of number one, embracing the fact that this is your reality. Things are never actually going to die down. And like we're saying, if they do, it won't be for long, or one stressor is just going to swap for another. So let's
Yeah.
embrace that. Like this is it for you. So it's actually best, it's most valuable for you to undergo whatever this journey, this transformation is when things are most chaotic, because it's your
Yeah.
reality. And then any other temporary, non chaotic season of life will feel a bit easier. And then from an action perspective, looking for those low hanging fruit, because something I've seen in your content that I really like is the idea of just people who already feel like they have a ton to do. There's already so much weighing on them logistically and mentally, not adding a bunch of additional things to their to-do list that feel more overwhelming, more daunting. That's why I'm generally not a fan of kind of this optimizing culture that we have right now, where everybody's wearing 72 wearables and they're familiar with every last piece of data, but they don't even have 5 servings of fruits and vegetables per day. And I'm not saying that data is, not valuable, and perhaps it's a rabbit hole that we can go down after. But just I like the idea of what are some, just let's look at your week, let's look at your habits across the board, whether it's the movement stuff, maybe it's stress management and sleep, nutrition. How can we rack up some quick wins for you so you feel good about this, obviously physically, and then I think mentally just feeling a lot more motivated that, wait a minute, I can actually do this. These weren't crazy changes that I had to make. I just did a few things that, made me feel a bit better, and then it spirals in a really good way.
Yeah, and it's that thing, isn't it? That motivation that comes from taking action. And if you feel like the action is having a positive impact, there's more chance of that snowballing. But if you go and try and tackle the hardest thing straight away and they find it really, really hard, it's almost they're looking for evidence at that point that they can't do it, you know, they're not capable of doing it. So if you show them with small things that actually you can, the belief as well, because there's a lot goes into identity, isn't there, and how we view ourselves and what we're capable of, especially with things like if you're not someone who's ever really exercised consistently, just tell yourself, oh, it's not for me, or I've never been able to stay consistent with this, or I'm not able to stick to things. So usually because you're trying to stick to to either things that are impossible to stick to, the too extreme or whatever, or they just don't fit your life. And it's because someone on social media, like you were saying before, like this optimization culture, and people are sharing their 10-step morning routines when, for a lot of my clients, if they can get 3 steps in before, that's amazing, like, so, it is, I do think social media there's some amazing parts to it because we've got access to so much more information, but also we've got access to a lot more information, which is
Yeah,
also the and not necessarily always accurate information. It's like
definitely.
overwhelm, isn't it, with what do I believe, even around sort of biohacking and things like that. And like you said, like a lot of people aren't even eating 5 fruit and veg a day, and they're worrying about their blood glucose levels, and they're monitoring their sleep, and they're like all of these trackers. It's like, just eat some fruit and vegetables, get some protein in your meals, and drink some water, and you'll feel amazing for it, and then all of those things, you'll stop thinking about them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you eventually want to fine tune, but I
Oh
have
yeah.
found time and time again that if you do nail the basics, you'll be more than satisfied with the outcomes that you see without ever having to creep into that really optimized territory. But yeah, I do think that's a byproduct of where social media is at right now, where if we create content around what we just talked about the last few minutes of, hey, you probably don't need this overabundance of data. Eat some fruits and vegetables, take a lap, drink water. That's not going viral. Whereas if we say this one weird hack, the 7 step routine before work, it increases productivity by 47%. And I think maybe sometimes it's well intentioned, but for the women that we work with who already have so much on their plate, I find that a lot of that content just constantly makes them feel like they're not doing enough, which
Yeah.
is the problem to begin with, or it makes them feel like what they are doing is wrong. In fact, a lot of the women that I work with, and I'm sure this is the case for you as well, when they hire me, they're already doing a lot of good shit. Like it's like, well,
Yeah.
I do this and then I go to the gym and do this and I'm trying to do this diet. But so the question isn't, or I should say the primary hurdle isn't like they're having a hard time taking action. They're just no longer sure of what action is best for them to take. It's like I'm willing to do something. I have these spurts of, really I'm being really ambitious from a health and fitness perspective, but I don't know if I'm deploying that time and effort in the right place and nothing seems to be working. So we almost have to see what we can strip, or like you said, that strip down the
Yeah.
on paper protocol to make sure that the time and effort that they do have that they are willing to give is being deployed in the right places, which is almost certainly not in this optimization direction.
No. And also, I do think as well, I think this is particularly with women, is that they are more likely to focus on all the things they didn't manage to do, all the things they haven't done. And often it's like big part of what I'm doing with them is reframing. Actually, you've skipped over the fact that you did this, 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 and this, and you focused on the fact that you missed one workout when you did all of this. And they're like, oh, yeah. But
Yes.
it's like it's happening. We are so hyper focused on our failures as we see it, and I always say to clients, you cannot fail at this. There is, you're not in a race. You can't fail at taking care of yourself. The only time that happens is when you completely give up. But if you have a week that's less than perfect, that's not a failure. As long as you're not repeating the same things in a cycle, that then is problematic. But if we will look at it and go, what happened last week then? Why did we not manage to do X, Y, and Z? Let's put this in place so that next time this will be what will happen instead. So it's like it's focus, it's being a bit kinder to ourselves. And that sounds really cliched, but it is true sometimes, we can be our own biggest critic, can't we? So I do think having someone who can sense check you sometimes, which is a lot of the time what I'm doing,
Yes.
it's valuable. It really
Yeah,
is.
definitely. An example that comes to mind in terms of how the frame impacts how you feel about how you're doing is if you have 4 workouts per week on your calendar and you only get three in, you may feel like you failed that week. Whereas if you say, okay, I'm going to do three workouts this week, and then day four is going to be optional if I'm able to get to that. And you get three workouts, the same action is taken. You get three workouts done by the end of the week. Scenario number one, you feel like you fell short. You feel like you failed. Like you said, Sarah, you probably are just focusing on workout number four that you did not get to. But with a different frame, a different metric of success in scenario number two, or three is my non-negotiable, four is icing on the cake if I get to it. The same action was taken, but we think about it differently. And I do find that's often our job as coaches is to make sure that, well, many jobs, one of them is to make sure that the initial plan is setting somebody up to feel successful. It's not,
Yeah.
again, this overwhelming thing with so many to-dos and so many you need to, you should be's that they constantly feel like scenario number one, well, I did this, but I didn't get to X, Y, and Z. And
And
then
one of the
also,
things,
yeah.
oh, go on, sorry. Carry
No,
on.
no,
What we
just to quickly finish that thought. And then also, inevitably, when things don't go perfectly, yes, there's such thing as, I think too much grace. We need to hold people to a certain
Yeah.
standard, but we also don't want to overlook all of the things you did well. I see that with clients all the time where maybe I give them a calorie range, protein, and fiber. And so three targets a day, 7 days a week, you have 21 total targets. And maybe they get 18 or 19 out of 21 targets, but they're focused on the one slightly higher calorie day. Or I'm like, you were 90% consistent with your nutrition this week. This doesn't take away all of that. So I still want to highlight and celebrate that?
Yeah, like what I was going to say then as well, when I was saying about, non-negotiables, one of the things I will do is I will say we're aiming for 4 workouts, 3 workouts minimum for optimal. And we will see things like steps. If someone has a desk job, we'll see steps as an average across the week. So they can afford to have days where they can't move as much because they are literally chained to the desk. And that might be the day when they have the deadline. And we know that realistically they are not moving from that desk. But it means then that they get to the end of the week and we're just looking at an average and they don't feel like they're failing. And it works. It's the way that you look at things matters, doesn't it? It's mentally you feel like you're not falling short. So it's
For sure.
anything you can do like that to sort of reframe what might otherwise be considered a failure. Because realistically, as well, if someone's doing 4 strength workouts, or that's amazing, but 3 is really good as well. If you're getting 3 strength workouts in, like and you said, the fourth one is just like the icing on the cake. So but you don't want to get into if someone really is able to do 4 and they're realistically there's a reason that they aren't showing up for that one, then that's a different issue. But if it is just a case of the job got on the way, or the kids needed this, or someone was sick, then that's all right. That's not a problem as long as you're hitting your baseline.
Definitely. And I do think people underestimate how productive that baseline can be. Like something I constantly talk to my clients about is the Pareto principle, the 80-20, where you get 80% of the results in most things you do from the 20%. So to use this workout example, as you know, Sarah, you get a shit ton of benefits from even 2 full body strength training sessions per week. If you get to 3, great. There's more benefit, but there's not
Yeah,
like proportionally more. It does level out to some degree. 4, again, perhaps additionally beneficial to some degree, but if you're looking at putting 5, 6 workouts per week on your calendar, things really start to level out. I would say, in the case of many of the women we work with, could actually be counterproductive in terms of it's not necessarily a good use of your time. It's something that could overwhelm you or drain you even more. So
yeah,
it's not like a more is better scenario. And I do think people need to remember that Pareto principle for steps, for workouts, for the food decisions that you're making. You're getting
yeah.
80% from the 20%. So let's at least nail that 20%. And then again, it's not necessarily more is better beyond that.
I think as well, if someone's like finds that they're consistently only able to do 3 workouts a week and they ideally like to do 4, I just say make sure you really, really nail those workouts, like push yourself, train with a level of intensity that means that you're going to be able to work just as hard as maybe the fourth workout. You wouldn't have had that same level of intensity in your training. So there's ways that you can manipulate that, isn't there? So that you're still putting your body through the same, the same level of intensity. And maybe you're just going to use that day that you wanted to do day four to get out for a walk and clear your head. And you're still supporting your health, you're still supporting your goals, but you're doing it in a different way. Like, I think it can be overcomplicated, can't it? It's so hard to believe that doing the basics is enough sometimes, I think, for people, because we're led to believe, like, it's this optimization thing. We should all be doing this, this, and this. And when I'm like saying to clients, I just want you to put protein in every meal and make sure you're getting enough fruit and vegetables and staying hydrated. And it's like, is that it? It's like, well, that's actually quite hard to do for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But, we don't need to be worrying about, like there was the Mel Robbins guest who talked about, you will have seen this, you basically not putting a banana in the same smoothie as a blueberry. And it was like, most people aren't eating enough fruit. We don't really need to be worrying about like whether we're eroding any of the polyphenols. Like, if you're having a banana and you're having blueberries, amazing. That's, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
It's almost like
that's the extent that people are worrying about these things now, isn't it? So
yeah, just like you said, it's the double-edged sword of social media where it's great we have access to so much information, but also we have access to a lot of information, and not every piece of information is for you. And I think sometimes that can be tough to decipher. And I often think about it with myself and other areas of life that aren't health and fitness, because of course, my education's in health and fitness, the certifications. I've now been coaching for 14 years. So at this point, I think I'm half decent at being able to pick the good information, out of the content that I see. But other areas in my life that are newer to me, other things that I'm trying to learn about, you'll see one piece of content that says, this is why you always need to be doing this. And then you scroll, and then the next piece of content says, here's why you should never do this. And if I don't have the education and the expertise, like law stuff, for example, I would know if the
yeah.
law information I'm looking at is somebody who's never studied that a day in his life. I may see something really convincing that gives me some terrible legal advice, but I don't know any better. So it is kind of tough.
I mean, I think even with like the blueberry banana thing as well, it's like even looking at where the information come from, because that actually did come from a doctor, didn't it? So it was like you could understand why people would start to jump on that. But when you actually dig down into the study, wasn't it like 8 people in the study, and
People.
only 6 of them completed the whole thing or something? So it's like
Yes.
it was based on 8 people. Like,
Yeah.
and it's only gone viral because of it. She was on the Mel Robbins podcast, hasn't it? But it starts people thinking about, it's all of this, the amount of women who are told that doing this will wreck your hormones. That's one that might get a lot. You shouldn't drink coffee before food and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, do you feel a negative effect if you have caffeine before you eat? They're like, not really, no. I was like, well, then that's probably an indicator that it's probably okay for you. But if it does have a negative effect, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's really that simple.
Yes. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to know, isn't it? Like what to believe. I think, especially when the sources themselves are outwardly the doctors and things like that as well. So even in that community, they can't agree on these things.
Sure. No, and I do think people need to keep in mind that a lot of these very large platforms, these very large accounts, like we talked about earlier in the episode, the most honest, realistic health and fitness information generally isn't the most, eye-catching. It doesn't make
Yeah.
for a great sound bite. They're not necessarily going to go viral. So I'm not saying everybody with a large account is not putting out good information, but I will say that I think it's at least a mix. Like the big accounts, you're going to get at least a little bit of a mix because they're almost playing a different game than somebody who is purely focused on giving, science-based, realistic information that can apply to a lot of people. And one other thing that I do want to briefly circle back to here is how you mentioned you can just go by the feeling test of, well, I'm supposed to do this, but I don't think I'm supposed to do this. I'm like, well, how do you feel when you do it? I feel good. Okay, fine. Or I don't feel great. And that can be the audit. I was was talking to a friend at a dinner a couple of nights ago who was having some discomfort, and it was like her rhomboid area, so her upper
Yeah.
back for people listening. And she was like, "Well, it feels kind of weird when I do." And she was doing like these crazy movements. I'm like, "Well, I would start by not doing that.
Do
We
that.
we can rule that out." And then she was feeling like, "Well, maybe I can't, go to the gym now." I'm like, "No, I would still go, and just it's a simple audit of, okay, when I do this specific movement, it's feeling a little bit off. Like, you don't necessarily need, an X-ray or a CAT scan or, all of these fancy, just this didn't feel great. Does this feel okay for you? Okay, cool. We're going to double down on
Yeah.
this movement. And I think we can do that in so many areas of life. We don't necessarily need to quantify or overanalyze absolutely everything. And I actually like there was a podcast that I was on years ago where the guest asked me if I thought the world would be better off not having a scale at all. Like you have the inability to weigh yourself, which I thought was an interesting question. It made for a
Yeah.
good conversation, but it made me really think about, well, oh, if we couldn't, gauge, say, somebody's body composition success or honestly just overall health and fitness success by the scale alone, what else would we look at even more? So I do like the idea of if I couldn't quantify this thing, if I never saw the social media post telling me my cortisol is going to spike and all my progress is going to be ruined, what would I go by? It would literally just be, how's my digestion? How are my energy levels? Do I feel sharp after? If so, okay. And I think that has you taken care of a lot of the time.
I think we don't trust ourselves enough sometimes as well, do we? So I think as well, because there is so much conflict information, especially I think women are a particular target of it because we have a pain point. So especially I definitely noticed as I got to above 40, the algorithm feeds me so much stuff around like Menno belly and, all of these different things, like all these supplements that I should be taking. And how I should be doing things so differently now so that, I'm in my 40s and stuff. And a lot of it is just they will take a grain of truth and blow it up. So there is like a tiny grain of truth in the odd thing. Some things there's no truth in at all. But only for me, like being able to pick through and work out where it's come from. And then I'll go and actually look at the study. Most people wouldn't do that, would they? So, or wouldn't want to do that. They would just trust the source. So it's just it's hard. It is hard. And it's like you saying, like in other areas of my life, I haven't got a clue. Like I know what I'm good
Sure.
at. So yeah, even in law, when I was in law, so I specialized in commercial litigation. But you would get family and friends saying, "Oh, I'm getting divorced," or such a person's, has just lost the job, or just all these different areas, or criminal law, and I'd be like, "Yeah, I don't know anything about that." And well, you're a lawyer. No, I'm a very niche, very niche
Yes.
specialist. We're all specialists in something, and I think the danger comes when people go out way outside of what their actual specialism is. But it's being able to identify that they've actually done that in the first place, isn't it? So it is hard.
That's tricky. Of course, that's where a good coach can be helpful with the information sifting, like we were
Yeah,
talking about a few minutes ago with the very ambitious type A clients that we have that are like, I'm taking here are the 17 supplements that I'm taking. Here are the 5 different classes that I'm doing. Here's the this. I'm like, wow, this is great. You're putting in an enormous amount of time and effort. I don't
yeah,
know who sent you in this direction. We are going to redirect you a little bit to things that are more manageable, to things that are higher yield. Again, just so that time and effort is directed to the best places because it can be tricky.
yeah, it can.
So, one of the last things I wanted to ask you about today was a recent podcast episode of yours where you talked about the very common scenario where somebody has lost weight, but they don't necessarily feel like they're looking more toned. And
Mm.
like we were also talking about a few minutes ago, a lot of people, at least for a little while, like everything just goes off of is the scale going down or not? That
Yeah.
is like the metric of success, which I often find puts people in that position where, okay, I've lost weight, but I don't really have that tone look that I'm after. So how do you help clients? What do you think causes that? And then how do you help clients do get more of that tone look that they're after?
The difference is normally a protein intake and some resistance training, and it could be home workouts, it could be something, but it's understanding that being toned is basically just having muscle that with a lesser layer of body fat over it, isn't it? So if you haven't got muscle, you're not going to look toned. And I think that we were chatted briefly about um, the use of GLP-1s at the moment and stuff, and people are losing weight more rapidly. So they're not allowing themselves the time to sort of work on retaining the muscle and building muscle. And that is then they get into the end of the process or wherever they might be, and they're just a smaller version of themselves, but there's no real definition. So it's I think for women as well, it's I love seeing now that women are strength training and there isn't that same fear around building muscle, because that definitely, in some of the women that I have coached in the past who have said to me, I just want to look toned, I don't want to build muscle, I'll just say, okay, that's fine. Because you don't always need to sort of explain. They know what they want, or they'll say to me, I just want to look toned like you. I don't want to build loads of muscle. And I'm like, I have literally spent years trying to build muscle. Like, what do you think this is?
Yeah.
So it's actually, again, it's not something that needs to be overly complicated. It's making sure that you're getting some resistance through your muscles and that you've got a decent amount of protein in your diet that is going to really help with maintaining or building, depending on what you want to do. Like, maintenance for some people is all that they want to focus on. So that's fair enough. But if you're just dieting and not doing any strength training, then you aren't going to look toned at the end of it.
Sure. Yeah, I like how you point out that honestly, not just toned, but toned, lean, defined. I look athletic, jacked. Literally everything just comes down to the amount of muscle and the amount of body fat and manipulating those two
It's
things.
body
And
composition.
yeah, that it's and but I also I like how you said that like I think a lot of new trainers when they hear like, well, I want to be toned, they're like, well, actually, like, just I know exactly what you mean.
I know
I
what
know
you mean.
exactly how to help. I know exactly how to help you get there. But I do think somewhere along the way, that is an interesting thing for people to learn is that, yeah, toned. The person who's trying to look more toned and the person who's trying to look jacked are often doing basically the same stuff from like a priority perspective. Maybe the person who's trying to be super jacked is a bit more frequency and volume, but it's not drastically different. Which I think is an interesting thing. But yeah, I think that's really good advice, making sure that the only metrics of success are not just calorie reduction and weight reduction, but making sure along the way you got some minimum standards in place for protein intake and for strength training so that most of the weight that you do lose is fat specifically. I always
Yeah.
think about it almost like chipping away at a sculpture. We don't want to
Yeah.
lose what's underneath. We're just kind of chipping away around it. Not that we can spot reduce, but just in terms of, maintaining what's
Yeah.
underneath.
I think as well, like it's just be doing it steadily, isn't it? Like not being in too much of a hurry to do it too rapidly. And I think that's where the GLP-1 thing has come in because it generally creates faster results. But you can lose muscle and do that just dieting without a GLP-1 if you do it, to the extreme. So it's having a bit of patience, isn't it? Which we're not all the best at doing, but have a bit of patience. And like you say, it's just about body composition. So I will have the conversations around that with clients. And if actually I ever coach anyone who is using a GLP-1, then that is one of my absolute bottom lines is I won't coach someone who is using a GLP-1 but not resistance training. So because the way that I coach is in a health focused way. So it would be, but if they're coming to me in the first place, it's because they want to do it in a health focused way. You wouldn't go to a coach otherwise, would you? You just do it yourself. So that is sort of, it's always a conversation that I have, like these are I would require this to coach someone on a GLP-1. It wouldn't just be a case of minimum calories and see what you can get away with eating, 800 calories and it's just crisps and pizza. It's not the way I coach.
Sure, sure. Sarah, the last question I have for you before we move on to the fast four, which is four rapid fire random questions I have for you at the end. The last question that I have for you is if there's a woman listening to this who is a business owner, a career woman, has an enormous amount on her plate, all the things that we're talking about, and it's like, okay, I got a lot of good information today, but which thing do I focus on first? Because Sam and Sarah were saying, well, this could be helpful and this could be helpful, but what's the one thing I can maybe take from this episode and start implementing or focusing on right away that could make a difference in my life? What direction would you send that person in?
I would say whole foods. make sure you're eating real food, and daily movement. Like they're the two things. So it could be getting out for walks. But if you're eating whole foods, you're going to be getting some nutrients in as well. So it's usually what's missing from someone's diet, isn't it? So that they're the two things that I would always start with. If someone was wanting to, and then you drill down, don't you, into how that's like a portion, protein and fruit and veg and blah blah blah. But if you can get someone just eating real food in this day and age, I think that's a big win.
Yes. I know this could be a rabbit hole, so I'll keep this very brief, but to the point about whole foods, I do find that a lot of women in this demographic will lean very heavily on convenience-based foods like protein bars, pre-made protein shake, high fiber wraps, high protein pasta. And yeah, those things can be tools in the toolbox,
Yeah.
but it's like, let me try to hack my way to my numbers. And again, I'm not ripping on that. There can be some of those foods that come in handy, but getting pretty far away from like, okay, maybe you hit the numbers on paper or like these things have good branding that make them feel super healthy, but just getting back to, yeah, mostly whole foods. Even if there's nothing else in place, you're going to feel better prioritizing that. And then I like the
Exactly.
combination of movement as well. Not necessarily a hardcore workout, but just move your body every day. I think that's a really good place for people to start.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Sarah. Last thing I have for you, the fast four. This is how I finished
Oh.
every episode. Don't worry, they're easy questions. So just four things that have nothing to do with health and fitness, just whatever the first thing is to come to mind. Number one, what would you be doing if you were not coaching and you could not return to anything law related?
Oh, I thought you were going to say go back to law. I was going to say go back to law then.
No, I thought
I
ahead to
was,
that.
can I say sports? Can I say more sports related?
Sure, yeah. What do you have in mind?
I would have gone into like sports science. I think I would have worked. I would love to work with like athletes and things like that. I think that would be really interesting. Or into
Now on
actually
the
or research itself, like the research element. I would have
Interesting.
loved.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, it's adjacent to health and fitness, but I'll give you that. I'll give you
Yeah.
that. If you could only have one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh
Pure
God.
enjoyment. Don't worry about if it's healthy or not. We'll assume that box
No,
is
I'm not.
checked.
I'm
Just
definitely
yeah.
not thinking
Okay.
of that.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
pasta for me. It's definitely pasta for me. I
Yeah.
love pasta. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a specific type that you like, or just any pasta is just
I'm pretty much any pasta. I do
yeah.
like, yeah, I do like pesto. I do like pesto with pasta.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great answer. Okay. Number three, what is something small that always improves your mood?
I think small movement,
Okay.
daylight. Yeah, getting out. Always improve. You never ever feel bad from getting outside, unless
Yes.
it's
No.
really bad weather.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough, fair enough. Uh, I will say that's something I often run into throughout my workday. I say Mondays are my primary client check-in day, and they're the days where I feel like I can't justify getting up away from my laptop. But then when I peel myself away from the computer and even just take one lap, I'm like, wow, I feel
Yeah.
amazing. I'm like, I need to remember that next time when I'm saying, no, I can't possibly. I'm like,
Yeah.
you'll be better off for it. Okay, what is one thing that you're excited about right now?
Ooh, I'm going to Lisbon. I'm excited to go
Oh,
away to Lisbon. Yeah. Never been, really wanted to go. So going in a few weeks' time. So yeah.
oh,
I
amazing.
love traveling. If I can see a new place, then amazing.
I'm going to add a fifth question for you then. What is a place that you've been that really stood out to you? Maybe it surprised you or it was just like particularly memorable.
There's a place I go back to every June now. So we went to a place in Spain, a little Spanish town called Estepona. I fell in love with it and go each year now. So I love the familiarity of it, but it's like old Spain. You'd probably love it. You'd learn loads of Spanish.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's
Well,
like a really
my li-
old, like yeah, it's like an old, like it's just lovely. But yeah, I love like traditional and more that sort of thing than like skyscrapers in Dubai or something. So yeah,
sure.
that
Yeah,
just
yeah.
yeah.
That's always the debate, huh, with travel when you're deciding on where to go. Do you go back to somewhere you know you love to get to know it more and just to enjoy the things you're familiar with, or do you pick somewhere totally new? I mean, I guess you can always do a mix, but I feel like
I
that is
do a
always a little bit
mix.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So each June go back, and then in September I always try and go somewhere new. So
Okay.
yeah, so never been to Lisbon. I'm going to Marrakesh as well in October. So never been there. So there's always
Great.
a nice mix. Yeah.
Yes, yes, that's great. Okay, Sarah, if somebody wants to learn more about you, where should we send them?
Instagram is Sarah Nolan Fitness. And yeah, probably there's best place to drop me a message, give me a little follow.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Sarah, this was super fun, and I really appreciate you coming on today.
It was great. Thank you very much.
Of course, we'll talk
Thanks for
soon.
having me on.